Hello and welcome. You're watching Budget 2024 Blueprint for the Big Leap, where as part of our pre-budget programming here on News 9 Live, on this edition, we're putting the focus on electric vehicles. What can the budget do to recharge electric mobility in India? We here at News 9 Live have indeed kicked off our pre-budget programming, and in this special series that we are calling Budget 2024 Blueprint for the Big Leap, we are focusing today on India's electric mobility. India's ambitious electrification targets for its vehicles by the year 2030. Will the upcoming budget provide the right push and recharge electric mobility in India? What's the road ahead as far as India's EVs and India's EV infrastructure is concerned? To discuss that, joining us on the show is a very special set of guests. We have Mr. Saurabh Agarwal, tax partner at EY India. We also have Mr. Dilip Chenoy, India Battery Swapping Association's chairman, joining us. Thank you, both of you gentlemen, for taking time out to be with us. I'm going to begin with Dilip Chenoy. Dilip Chenoy, talk to us. FAME 2 was largely about providing discounts as far as electric two-wheelers are concerned. Now, FAME 2 is over. The expectations are all on what FAME 3 is going to be about. But from your perspective, what are your expectations from Budget 2024 as far as electric vehicles in India are concerned?
So I think, Krishna, from the perspective, there'll be a macro perspective and there'll be a micro perspective. So let me first take the macro perspective. I think, we have to, create consumption, okay? So whether we do expenditure, we increase capital expenditure, we look at specific allocations for specific sectors, but unless consumption in the hand of the common man increases, whether it's direct tax issues or whatever it is, but consumption has to improve. The second is on the whole area of electric mobility. Like you have a quantum computing kind of a target or the artificial intelligence target, I think the time now has come to look at an overall, mobility kind of a research and development initiative going forward. And third, I think there has to be some focus on urban cities and urban infrastructure to promote the concept of e-mobility going forward. So this is at the macro level. At the micro level, you talked about FAME and FAME 2 and FAME 3 in the transition. You had one FAME 2.5 in the interim budget. But I think going forward, FAME 3 has to do multiple things. And then that's the challenge if you have a limited amount of money of 10,000 crores or 9,500 crores, depending on what it is. Can you increase it? It'll be great if you increase it. So the first thing you have to do is that there's a certain framework that is existing for 2 and 3 wheelers and commercial vehicles, which is the taxi segment and other segments. I think you have to look at continuing something there in that framework to enable and incentivize the people to buy electric vehicles. The second aspect of this has to be in the commercial vehicles and in the bus and truck segment, where we have to provide incentives or provide a structure for reducing the cost of buses and trucks on the ground so that we can improve penetration. Now, there are two ways of doing it, right? The first way is that, you actually promote the use of fixed battery vehicles, right? But if you look at innovatively and look at buses which could have swapped vehicles, for example, in China, nearly 50% of the buses and the heavy trucks on the road being sold every month are on swapping basis. So that will actually reduce the cost of the truck or bus to the eventual owner, and you have to pay per use for the battery and on a per kilometer basis. So I think in the FAME 3 framework, if they include swapping was originally not included in the FAME 2 scheme of things. If they include swapping, it will be a great benefit, not only to reduce the cost of ownership of a vehicle to all segments of society, but also help invest more. The other aspect is when you're looking at charging infrastructure and public charging infrastructure, I think you have to be technology neutral and make it both for fixed and for swapping. Currently, it is not very clearly indicated what the swapping would be. And the state should be encouraged to actually add on to the incentives there. So these would be basically my macro and micro
Right.
suggestions for the budget. I'm not talking about GST because GST is not a budget issue.
Fair enough. Saurabh, let me bring this back to you. Talk to us the way adoption of electric vehicles can be increased in the country is only if you make electric vehicles more affordable to the consumers, especially at the time when the charging infrastructure is yet to be fully developed. At this moment in time, we're having this conversation, neither are there any discounts for electric two-wheelers, nor there are any for four-wheelers or for cars. For example, the latest electric vehicle policy, chooses to give discounts to only to those cars manufactured and worth 40 lakh rupees and plus. How many Indians go out there and buy cars worth 40 lakh rupees and plus?
I think multiple comments from my end. First, I'll start with the FAME 3 because it was much talked about, and I'll take it forward from the comments which were made by the other speaker. The point which I want to make on the FAME 3 is two-wheeler, three-wheeler buses is being talked about, but when we talk about a four-wheeler or a passenger car segment, the FAME subsidy was available only in case of B2B. Now it's a high time wherein government should look at giving the FAME subsidy even for a B2C type of cases, because otherwise it is a requirement wherein you need to put up a leasing company in between and subsequently go for a FAME subsidy. So therefore, electric four-wheeler adoption is also very much required. Coming to your point which you raised around that electronic passenger or car manufacturing scheme which talked about a 40 lakh plus car. See, this is more of a scheme which is being made to ensure that there are a testing of market which can be done by some of the big players, who in turn after that testing will bring in significant investments ranging from 4,000 and going up to 6,000 odd crores per factory. So these particular investments, when we look at overall from a perspective of a single factory, it's 4,000 to 6,000 crore, but they come up with a lot of ancillaries also. So the ancillary investment can range again from maybe 4,000 to 10,000 crore per such project which comes into picture, which in turn means that there will be a real localization in the market. And this real localization will lead to costs coming down for the electric vehicles. It doesn't mean that that factory which is being made need to necessarily manufacture a car of 40 lakh rupee each. They can go for a car of 20 lakh, they can go for a car of 30 lakhs as well. It is the import concession which is allowed to a car of 40 lakh.
Right. At this stage, Saurabh, if I were to then ask you that question, what would be your expectations specifically when it comes to recharging or pushing and boosting adoption of electric mobility in this country? What expectations do you have from the budget towards achieving that aim? Because we do have a target of having 30% electric vehicles by the year 2030.
So I think I have 3 or 4 expectations. FAME 3 we already talked about. The second expectation which I foresee from the budget is to continue with the income tax concession, which was available till 31st March 2024, which was at an income tax rate of 15% for all the new manufacturing units. So said concession should continue for maybe next 2 to 3 years to ensure that from an EV manufacturing standpoint, the corporate tax rate is lower, which in turn means that the vehicle will be cheaper for the end consumer. Second expectation will be from the charging infrastructure standpoint. There's a requirement to provide subsidies for the charging infrastructure as well. While the charging infrastructure for electric vehicles is getting pushed into the country, but as of now, when you go on the highways, you may not find the charging stations everywhere. So that's another important area where the government should work on. I think the fourth point, which I would at least put my bets upon, while of course GST will not be a consideration during the budgets, but hybrid vehicles. So when we talk about adoption of EVs, it's a journey from ICE to EV, and a lot of companies have been talking about it. So there is a requirement to bring down the customs duty on hybrid vehicles and the hybrid vehicle parts. And similarly on the GST also, while it may not be a discussion point during budgets, but it's a necessity now to come up with a lower rate of GST on the hybrid vehicle. So in the budget, custom duty should be lowered on hybrid vehicles and their parts. Similarly, maybe in a small short term, when the next GST council happens, they should consider lowering down the rate of GST on hybrid vehicles.
Right. Dilip Chenoy, let me bring this back to you. You talked about the macro and micro challenges when it comes to boosting electric mobility in this country. But what do you think is the key factor that's going to play a role in terms of us achieving that 30% of cars in this country being electric by the year 2030? And what can the budget do about it?
Is that if you look at the what could the budget do to accelerate the penetration of electric vehicles in different segments? If I just take the all the different ministries that are funded from the thing. I mean, if you're looking at Ministry of Defense or the different other ministries that are there, I think they should be encouraged to actually front load their expenditure on vehicles and make them spend on vehicles, so they actually create a kind of increased demand there. You have the PM bus scheme, which is there. I think we need to announce enhancement and kind of a phase 2 of that, and kind of provide some incentives for the state governments to actually do such purchases of buses. I think for the common person, I think there is some, and Saurabh would be best placed to talk about this, but there is some ambiguity whether lending to electric vehicles is under the priority sector lending or not. And if it's not under priority sector lending, then certain financial institutions cannot lend in this sector. So I think we need to look at enabling financing. SIDBI had done a small paper, but that was only for 10,000 vehicles. But we need to be able to expand this, because the greater the financing in this sector, and if you can address the challenges of financing in the sector for the 2 and 3 wheelers, you will actually see that penetration improving. And then as Saurabh mentioned, you have to look at some corporate incentives, like he talked about the 15% tax that is there, and also a kind of the PLI scheme on manufacturing and others. Their execution actually, and the FAME 3 subsidy dispensation went into some kind of a legal aspect. I think we need to be able to sort that out and go forward and ensure that the money is due to all the corporates and the other people are paid out, and then they can actually start expanding that. And I think on charging infrastructure, although Saurabh made the point, I think it should be technology neutral and promote swapping as well as fixed charging infrastructure. So this is something with which the government could do here. And I also mentioned, while Saurabh made a very valid point about hybrid, but we need to actually see how we can promote technology missions, maybe under DST or a collaborative mission here, to reduce the cost of components and the cost of batteries within the country, so that these vehicles become more affordable to the consumer or to the fleet owners that actually use them.
Right, talking about hybrid, let me bring that question to Saurabh. Correct me if I'm wrong, right now the EV policy is restricted only to electric vehicles. Would you say we are at the moment in need of a broader policy that includes hybrids as well as flex fuels? Because the idea is to reduce dependence on petrol and diesel and possibly bring down that import bill, so the current account deficit remains at that 1% or even can be brought down even further. So keeping that in mind, wouldn't we be better off having an overarching policy that includes everything from electric vehicles to hybrids to flex fuels?
So, I think it's a much debated subject, and I think the intention of the government around hybrids has been very clear. So I would not suggest that there should be a specific subsidy for hybrids. Even if they bring down the rate of GST on hybrids, that will be leading to a significant cut in the price of the hybrid vehicles, which in turn will enable the consumer to get it at a more affordable price, and which will also help us in achieving our own sustainability or the green targets which we have. So maybe overall policy may or may not be required at this particular juncture of time as far as hybrid is concerned. Of course, for flex fuel, the government's focus has always been there, and for flex fuel, they have been coming out with various set of policies. Some more clear path for a long term will always help the industry. And one thing which I always keep on saying for all the sectors where PLI has been rolled out by the government is to come up with a clear program for phase increase in duty from finished goods, then moving to intermediates, and then moving to raw materials. Or raw materials, when I say you can say a component which is being made by a tier 3 component manufacturer or tier 2 component manufacturer. This will clearly lay down the path for all the stakeholders, whether it is the OEM, it is the component manufacturer, it is the private equity owner, it is the shareholders, or it is the lender. This will enable them to have a clear path as to where do they need to invest into various parts of the auto chain, whether it is a electric vehicle or a hybrid or a flex fuel or IC. So that will help in clearly laying down those paths for the industry.
Dilip Chenoy, would you concur with what Saurabh Agarwal is saying? You know, at the end of the day, it is a highly debated subject, but I'm reiterating it simply because India's dependency on petrol and diesel, the more it goes down, the better it is for the economy as a whole.
Yeah, fully aligned, Krishna, with your point of view. But the challenge here is what could the government do? And most of the interventions here in the GST realm, right, which are not necessarily budget items. Yes, and also even if I look at creating a differential between petrol and let's say 20% ethanol or something like that, even if it's 1 or 2 rupees there, to enable that to go in is a challenge, because you want to look at the ethanol pricing to be able to reward the farming community for producing ethanol for blending. So it's a huge challenge which is there, but primarily it's in the area of GST what they could do. And of course, Saurabh mentioned that if they extend the manufacturing income tax reduction to 15%, and this is applicable on those people who set up additional capacity to produce hybrids or flex fuel vehicles, and they'll get benefit there. But again, if you recall, I talked about this national mobility mission and or R&D and all of that, and that's where you can actually work with companies and kind of have some R&D funding or joint funding or matching funding, whatever the government wants, to be able to develop products and systems that could be owned and developed by companies in India, which could go over to the world. So, how do you use this, Modi 3.0 budget, as you are calling it, to be a stepping stone to ensure India's kind of extension and relevance in the international e-mobility marketplace?
Right, I'm also asking this because right now there are no incentives for car makers in India to to line up more and more hybrids. There's technically no incentive in terms of hybrids or flex fuels, or for that matter, electric vehicles. The existing Indian car manufacturers, and you've seen auto sales not being in the pink of health, especially over the last 3 months, especially since the beginning of this financial year, isn't it, Mr. Dilip Chenoy?
Yeah, Krishna, but the only thing that they could actually do is to reduce the GST, right? And or give incentives for manufacturing there. But that's a challenge because you already have the PLI scheme, which is looking at the manufacturing. You already have the alternate chemistry kind of battery chemistry PLI. And you have the component PLI. So those three are existing. I think if they can tweak it to ensure that disbursements are, prompt and fast and and in a transparent manner, and we don't get into the FAME 2 type of controversy, it would really help create a very positive image for the sector going forward.
Saurabh, is it a matter of better execution than better policy making at this stage? Because at the end of the day, the entire FAME 1 and 2, the idea was right, but both of them had issues when it comes to the actual implementation.
So, Krishna, before commenting on the part of execution of these schemes, first let me go to the point which you said that there are no incentives which are available to a OEM manufacturing a hybrid vehicle or a flex fuel vehicle. I think, it's very important to understand that today each state government in India is opening up their coffers to offer incentives to anyone who is setting up their shops or they are increasing their capacities into the state government, into that particular state. The range of this incentive from the state government ranges from 25% and can go up to 125% of the investment amount which you are making into the state is spread over a period of maybe 7 years to 10 years time. So it is not correct to say that the state governments are not offering subsidies. So state governments are already offering those capital subsidies, or you can call as investment subsidies, to the OEMs as well as component manufacturers, which in turn is helping them in getting a better IRR. Maybe the execution is a challenge. So now I'll take the point on execution with respect to a FAME execution, or to a state government subsidies execution. It is very important for the industry that for all these particular incentives, there's a lot of documentation requirement which is there. End of the day, it is a taxpayer money. So I think government to that extent is right when they talk about the implementation of a PLI, or they talk about the implementation of a FAME, or they talk about the implementation of a state industrial policy related subsidies. You need to run it as a project management office. You need to put in the right resources in place so that the documentation is there and you are claiming the money from the government. And trust me, this government's intent is to give the money on time, subject to you doing the compliance. Of course, it is our money, it is taxpayers' money, so compliance has to be done properly.
Right, compliance has to be done properly. One last comment from Dilip Chenoy before we wrap things up. Dilip, your quick comment on the most important thing that needs to be done immediately in the upcoming budget to boost electric mobility in India.
I think not that I'm representing the swapping association, but I think you need to be technically neutral, introduce the swapping option in both the FAME 3 policy as well as make it part of the public charging infrastructure. That will be dramatically change the whole way that this EV penetration is going forward.
Right. I'm afraid we've completely run out of time with that. Dilip Chenoy, Chairman, India Battery Swapping Association, thank you so much for joining us. And of course, Saurabh Agarwal, Tax Partner, EY India, thank you so much for being with us. And with that, we wrap up this special edition of Budget 2024 Blueprint for the Big Leap. We'll be back with lots more in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. This is Krishnakumar signing off.